You're listening to a podcast by Way Collective, a contemplative community for love and liberation in Santa Barbara, California. This recording was the conversation starter at our dinner and dialogue gathering on January 21st, 2026. Thanks for tuning in. Well, it's really great to see everyone together in the same room tonight. Tonight feels sacred in a sort of special way, doesn't it? Not because we've got everything in this partnership figured out, but because something is being joined together, something is being shared, and something is being trusted into existence. And what is so sacred to me about this is that I believe that what we need in our time are communities of peaceful presence. Now, I don't say that lightly, as I think you all know. I say it because we're living in a time of division and fragmentation and violence and control, a time when so many systems are built on fear, a time when speed replaces depth and reaction replaces reflection and outrage replaces real relationship. And in a time like this, what we need are people who are learning to be neighbors again, people who connect and heal and empower others toward life and liberation. That's what I hope we're doing here, even when it doesn't feel overtly significant, even when it just feels ordinary, even when it feels like, hey, I'm just sort of showing up tired to have dinner and some conversation with friends. What we are doing each week is learning together how to bring a deeper sense of inner peace into our relationships and into our world. I know that we all know this. It's essentially what we pursue each week, and what so many of our conversation series revolve around here at Way Collective. But tonight is different, because in this moment of coming together, where our community is welcoming new members and literally doubling in size, I want to invite us to do something simple and sacred right here at the beginning of this talk. So for just a moment, I want to invite each of you to take a pause in silence. Right now, not with your eyes closed, but instead, I want to invite you to look around, to take a silent moment to make eye contact with those around your table. So as you do this, I just want to give you a few moments. You can just nod with no words, but just silent recognition. So let's pause for a moment and just make eye contact with folks around the table. So why are we here together? What is it in the eyes of our neighbors that we're actually looking for? What new trust can we build? What's happening in this moment of coming together? It's so beautiful what we're building here in this kinship. And sometimes I find that when I feel as though I can't conjure up peace for myself, it's in the support and friendship and care, or especially presence of a neighbor, that I find it. You know what I mean? Has anyone had that experience? I know that when I could not, or especially did not know how to find peace, it was always my therapist or my wife or my kids or my friends who were the ones in whom I could confide or kind of find myself when I had lost myself. There's a philosopher by the name of Merleau-Ponty who said, "The gaze of the other confirms my body." Isn't that a good line? I love that line. Because what he's saying is that we come more deeply into ourselves through relationship. We remember who we are because someone else sees us. We settle because we're held in the awareness of another. And maybe you've had a moment like this where all you could do was sort of just curl up, either literally or metaphorically, in the presence of another person and just allow yourself to be held. What's fascinating about this to me as a mystic is this connection between this idea and the spiritual practice that's actually hidden in plain sight in the teaching of Jesus. You all know that phrase, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the second teaching, he says, which is like it, is to love your neighbor as yourself. So essentially, he says, our entire religion hangs on these two things. So in the same way that the gaze of your neighbor across the table confirms your body and can bring it to rest, the divine gaze is also within you, inviting you into peace. So what Jesus is saying in that ancient text is that his summary of his own religious tradition, the entire movement of Judaism, could be summed up in love God with everything you have and love your neighbor as yourself. That's it. There was no other teaching for him that could say it better or that mattered more. And of course, we can notice together that love is the common theme here, right? The way we say it here at Way Collective each week is that we ground our lives in love for the work of love in the world. And we're doing this each week in various ways. But what I want to say tonight, especially as we, both of our communities, come together under the banner of Kin Commons, is that to love God isn't to get the correct concept of God or even to believe in God in the way we were taught to believe things as kids in Sunday school. It's not to think only metaphysically or metaphorically about God. It's not to hear only the Christian monotheist story about God and ascribe to that, even though for most of us that is our tradition. I wonder, though, if to love God is to plainly and simply open ourselves to love, to keep a daily rendezvous as we're able with no other agenda but love and welcome and hospitality, that space of belonging for all that's really going on in our inner lives. Because if we're being honest, we're all busy, right? We're holding a lot. Some of us are parents who are holding a lot for our kids. We're just trying to get by following our toddlers or our young children around. Some of us in this room are grandparents who are supporting those parents, right? Or perhaps we're in our own seasons of navigating, caring for our parents who are also aging, or we're tending to our own aging processes. Perhaps some of us are just trying to stay afloat in the turbid socio-political waters of our time. Anybody feel like that? Some of us are just struggling to get by either financially or emotionally or whatever it may be. We're all holding a lot, aren't we? And the invitation, I feel, is to let love hold you as you hold everything that you're carrying, to make room for everything in your life to belong. But that's also just one side of the coin, because the other way that we love God is actually by loving our neighbors. It's not just contemplative practice and tending to the inner life that we come to know love. It's when we show up for each other that this becomes embodied and real to us. This is just as authentic an expression of loving God as prayer or silence or meditation. So the connection I want to make for us tonight is this. If we want peace, if we want to be a peaceful community, if we want Santa Barbara to be more peaceful, if we want our world to be more peaceful, then what it takes is presence. It takes women and men like you and me showing up and choosing the way of peace, choosing to be nonviolent in our dealings with ourselves and with each other, choosing to unplug from the vicious cycles our world catches us in, that constant spin cycle of outrage and fear and exhaustion. And what I want to encourage us in tonight is that even if you only have enough presence to be with your toddler or your young child, that's enough. You don't have to fix the rest of the world. Even if all the presence you can muster on a Wednesday night is simply to show up and eat and listen because you're too tired to talk, that is enough. Even if your presence leads you to choose kindness instead of negativity toward one single person that day, just in one interaction with one weird coworker or annoying friend or spouse or one difficult human in your life, that is enough. And if you have the wherewithal to show up for those hurting people who touch your life, to care about one issue, to take on one mantle of justice, then that is more than enough. So whatever season you're in, I hope you hear from me that peace begins with presence in one small area of your life, and it grows out from there in its due time. I remember when I was going through my cancer journey and this woman who I worked with on staff at a previous church said, "Hey, give me all your medical bills. I'll sort them, I'll check your EOBs, I'll make sure you're only paying what you're supposed to pay and not getting double charged." And it was a game changer in a moment when we were already holding so much, and her presence lightened our burden. I remember when I was struggling a couple of years ago with the stress of all that I was carrying personally and professionally, and I reached out to a mentor friend of mine in a moment of desperation. And he, with his own busy schedule and the demands of others, said, "Hey, just call me right now." And he let me unload all of that stuff on him and quietly received it and encouraged me and was just present with me, In fact, I remember just this last December on Christmas Day, I was so tired from this past fall and getting the Christmas Eve service done and staying up late getting things set up for the kids on Christmas Eve, and I had a rough night's sleep. And the last thing that I wanted to do on Christmas Day was drive a few hours in the rain to see family. And Kara just said to me, "Tim, I'll drive." And I said, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much." And I proceeded to take essentially a couple-hour nap on the drive down. And you know what? Just that small act of kindness saved my day. As Rachel Naomi Remen has said, the goal isn't to heal the whole world, because none of us can do that. But instead, we can be a part of healing the world that touches us, the world that brushes up against our life. And I've received kindness from countless people who are peaceful and present. And I know what it feels like to be loved and cared for, and that, in turn, inspires me to try and be a part of that same movement in others' lives, I believe that each of you in this room know exactly what I'm talking about. So tonight really is a moment of becoming. We have two communities that are becoming one movement for love and liberation and peace and presence. We're becoming a commons where all people are seen as kin and invited to participate in this movement of grounded, loving presence and the work of justice in the world. And I want to invite us again to remember what it was like to look into the eyes of your neighbors just a couple moments ago, to recognize their kinship, to recognize yourself in them and they in you, and to feel that spark of connection and compassion within yourself. Everyone in here has walked a secret journey that you know nothing about. And yet we're all connected in our love and humanity. And we're each invited to be community with and for each other. And friends, beloved community ripples out from there. The research is showing these days that what churches need aren't more things to do, but more opportunities to be with each other. And I really hope that in this emerging partnership, in this building, in this space, we are creating a place where more people can be grounded in ancient spiritual practices and in relationship, can belong in a contemplative community that's focused on love, and can become a part of nurturing a more connected, compassionate, and just world. Friends, this kind of presencing is enough. And as the Talmud says, do not be overwhelmed as much as you can by the enormity of the world's grief. Ours is not to finish the work, but neither is it ours to abandon it. Our invitation is to meet the grief of the world and each other with as peaceful a presence as we can muster. And so tonight, I want to give us each permission to keep going, to stay grounded in our religious traditions without shrinking, to stay spiritual without bypassing complexity and critical thinking, to practice faith as participation in this peaceful presence rather than as a defense of my in-group's belief. That is the path forward. And as I look at both First Congregational Church and Way Collective, in so many ways, this is the journey that we've each been on for a long time. And so I want to call these things to heart tonight because they're just as vital as we move into this new season together. And so may we practice this peaceful presencing as we move forward together. All right, I have 3 contemplative questions for conversation around your tables. So we'll begin with the first question, which is the self question. Where in your life right now are you being invited to practice peaceful presence, not by doing more, but by simply showing up with what you have in gentle ways? Number 2, the sacred question. What helps you most open yourself to love, to feel held, seen, or confirmed either by God or those around you in this season of your life? And lastly, the society question. Where do you sense a small, ordinary invitation to be a neighbor, to offer presence, kindness, or justice in the part of the world that touches your life. Thanks for listening to this podcast by Way Collective. To keep up with our community, you can subscribe to this podcast, go to www.waycollective.org, or follow us on Instagram at @waycollective. Peace and every good, y'all.